Are you an INFJ who has wondered about the dark side of your personality? We all have one, you know. It's that part of us that we might not be proud of, that we might even be a little afraid of. But it's not necessarily a negative thing. In fact, understanding and embracing our dark side can lead to personal growth and improved relationships. Let's talk about the INFJ personality type. Now, if you're not familiar with these terms, INFJ stands for introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. These individuals are often seen as quiet, empathetic, and future-oriented. They value deep, meaningful relationships and have a knack for understanding others. But like everyone else, INFJs too have a dark side. This dark side can manifest in various ways, such as high expectations, suppressing negative emotions, abruptly shutting people out, overthinking, moodiness, and stubbornness in planning. These traits, while part of the INFJ's personality, can sometimes lead to missed opportunities and strained relationships. But remember, having a dark side doesn't make you a bad person. It simply makes you human. Embracing this dark side can actually empower you to better understand yourself and others, and to navigate life more effectively. To illustrate this, allow me to introduce Maria. Maria is an INFJ, and like many INFJs, she was struggling in her relationships. She found herself being misunderstood, feeling overwhelmed, and at times shutting people out. She knew something needed to change, but she wasn't sure what or how. And then Maria began to explore the concept of embracing her dark side. She realized that instead of suppressing these traits, she could acknowledge them, understand them, and learn how to manage them. This was not an easy journey for Maria, but it was an enlightening one. The journey to embracing our dark side can be enlightening. Let's see how Maria's life transformed when she embraced hers. This is not just Maria's story. It's the story of every INFJ, and in fact everyone who's ever felt misunderstood or struggled with their darker traits. So let's look deeper into this journey, shall we? What makes an INFJ unique? What's their dark side? The INFJ, or the introverted, intuitive, feeling, judging personality, is often misunderstood. This is because of their rare combination of traits that make them a paradox in the world of personalities. They are introverted yet care deeply about people. They're intuitive, able to sense emotions and intentions, but can sometimes miss the obvious. They feel intensely but often struggle to express these feelings. And they have a strict sense of order and plan meticulously, yet can be surprisingly spontaneous. The INFJ personality is known for having a unique perspective of the world. They see things not just as they are, but as they could be. This visionary perspective combined with their deep feeling. Nature often leads them to champion causes and ideas, making them passionate advocates. However, their idealism can also be a double-edged sword. It can lead to high expectations, not just of themselves, but also of others. When these expectations are not met, disappointment is inevitable. One of the darker aspects of the INFJ personality is their tendency to overthink. This overthinking often stems from their intuitive nature and their desire to understand the world around them. However, this can lead to anxiety as they turn possibilities over and over in their minds, considering every potential outcome. Another shadowy trait of INFJs is their moodiness. Their deep sensitivity and strong emotions can make them prone to mood swings. This, coupled with their introverted nature, can make them appear distant and aloof at times. Stubbornness, particularly when it comes to their plans, is another dark trait of the INFJ. They have a clear vision of their future and how to get there. When something or someone threatens this plan, they can become inflexible and resistant to change. The door slam is another facet of the INFJ dark side. Maria too was familiar with this. This is a mechanism where an INFJ abruptly cuts people out of their lives when they feel they've been wronged or hurt too deeply. It's a defense mechanism, a way of protecting themselves from further pain. But it can also lead to lost relationships and regret. Stay tuned to hear more about Maria's experience with the INFJ door slam. Maria, like many INFJs, was struggling. But what was causing her struggle? Maria's story is a familiar one, a tale of high expectations, overthinking, and the struggle to connect. Maria, like many INFJs, had a deep desire for meaningful relationships, but her own personality traits often stood in her way. She had high expectations of both herself and others. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it often drove her to achieve great things. But when it came to relationships, these high expectations often led to disappointment. She expected deep, meaningful connections right from the start, and when reality didn't meet these expectations, it led to frustration and disillusionment. Maria also had a tendency to overthink, to dissect every conversation, every look, every silence. This overthinking often led to unnecessary stress and worry. It created problems where there were none and blew minor issues out of proportion. The smallest misunderstanding could spiral into a major issue in her mind, causing her to question the entire relationship. And then there was the infamous INFJ door slam. Maria, like many INFJs, had a tendency to abruptly cut off relationships that she felt were causing her harm or stress. On the one hand, this was a form of self-protection. On the other hand, it often led to regret and loneliness. All these traits combined, the high expectations, the overthinking, the door slam, created a perfect storm of struggle for Maria. She wanted to connect, to form deep and meaningful relationships, but her own personality traits were getting in her way. She felt trapped, caught in a cycle of wanting to connect, struggling to do so, and then retreating into herself. But Maria was not one to give up. She knew that something had to change. She started to realize that these struggles, these challenges, were not something to be ashamed of. They were part of who she was, part of her INFJ personality. And if she could learn to understand and embrace them, perhaps she could turn them into strengths instead of weaknesses. Maria's journey to embracing her dark side was about to begin. How can embracing your dark side change your life? You may be taken aback by such a question. After all, why should we embrace something that's considered dark? But let's think about it this way. In order to appreciate the light, we need to acknowledge the darkness. This is especially true for INFJs, who are known for their complex and often misunderstood personalities. Now let's revisit our friend Maria, the INFJ we've been following. Maria, like all INFJs, has high expectations of herself and others. This can sometimes lead to disappointment and strain in her relationships. But instead of denying this aspect of herself, Maria chose to embrace it. She acknowledged her tendency to set high standards, and instead of seeing it as a flaw, she recognized it as a strength. This acceptance allowed her to communicate her expectations more clearly to others, leading to healthier and more satisfying relationships. Similarly, Maria used to bottle up her negative emotions, a common characteristic among INFJs. These bottled-up emotions would sometimes erupt, causing her to abruptly shut people out, a phenomenon known as the INFJ door slam. But when Maria started to embrace her dark side, she began to understand why she was doing this. She realized that it was her way of protecting herself from emotional harm. With this understanding, Maria learned to express her feelings before they became overwhelming, thus preventing the door slams. In embracing her dark side, Maria also came to terms with her tendency to overthink. She realized that this was a result of her rich inner world, a trait that's typical of INFJs. Instead of letting her thoughts control her, Maria learned to harness them in a positive way, using them to fuel her creativity and problem-solving skills. Stubbornness in planning and moodiness are other traits that Maria learned to embrace. She recognized that these were just manifestations of her deep desire for order and her sensitivity to her surroundings. Instead of fighting these traits, Maria learned to work with them, turning them into assets rather than liabilities. Embracing her dark side was a turning point in Maria's life. It allowed her to understand herself better and to build stronger, more authentic relationships. And remember, this isn't just Maria's story. It's the story of every INFJ who's brave enough to embrace their dark side. What changes when you embrace your dark side? A profound question indeed. The answer, as we've seen in Maria's journey, is quite simply everything. After acknowledging and understanding her dark side, Maria experienced a remarkable transformation. The high expectations she'd set for herself and others, the bottled-up negative emotions, the tendency to shut people out. These were no longer hidden away, lurking in the shadows. Instead, they were brought into the light, examined and dealt with in a healthy manner. The first noticeable change was in her confidence. No longer was she second-guessing her decisions or actions, worried about how they would be perceived. She stood tall in her truth, unapologetically herself. This newfound confidence had a ripple effect, touching every area of her life. At work, her colleagues began noticing a more assertive, decisive Maria. She was no longer the quiet one at the back of the room. She was front and center, contributing valuable insights and leading with conviction. This, in turn, led to her being given more responsibilities and opportunities, a testament to her growth. In her personal relationships, Maria's transformation was equally dramatic. She was more relaxed, less concerned with meeting impossible standards. She was able to be present, truly enjoy the company of her loved ones, without the constant worry of disappointing them or not living up to their expectations. This relaxation allowed her relationships to flourish, becoming more authentic and satisfying. But perhaps the most significant change was in Maria's happiness. Embracing her dark side was akin to lifting a heavy weight off her shoulders. She was happier, more at peace with herself. She no longer felt the need to hide or suppress parts of herself. She was whole, complete, and this inner peace radiated outwards, touching everyone she interacted with. Maria's story is a testament to the power of self-awareness and acceptance. By embracing her dark side, she was able to transform her life in unimaginable ways. And the same can be true for each one of us. All it takes is a willingness to look within, an open mind, and the courage to face what we find there. How can understanding your dark side lead to a happier life? You might have heard the saying, "Know thyself." It's an ancient wisdom that holds true today, especially for INFJs. This personality type, with its unique blend of introversion, intuition, feeling, and judging, has a lot to offer the world. But to truly shine, INFJs need to become self-aware, to understand both their bright and dark sides. Understanding your dark side isn't about wallowing in negativity or becoming consumed by it. Instead, it's about acknowledging that it exists and that it's a part of who you are. It's about accepting that even the most caring, insightful INFJ can sometimes be moody, overthink, or shut people out. By recognizing these tendencies, you can work to change them or at least manage them. You can learn to express your negative emotions in healthy ways rather than stuffing them down. You can catch yourself when you start to overthink and gently guide your thoughts back to the present. You can learn to communicate your needs clearly, avoiding the dreaded INFJ door slam. And here's the beautiful part. When you understand your dark side, you can also better understand others. You can empathize with their struggles because you've faced your own. You can form deeper, more meaningful connections because you're not afraid to show your true self. Remember Maria's story? She was struggling in her relationships, feeling uneasy and not quite herself. But when she embraced her dark side, she found relief, authenticity, and happiness. She learned to set boundaries and attract healthier relationships. She became more effective in her work, her friendships, and her marriage. Self-awareness was the key to her transformation, and it can be the key to yours too. So, take time to explore your dark side. Reflect on your high expectations, your tendency to overthink, your moodiness. Understand them, accept them, and learn from them. Embracing your dark side, like Maria did, can open doors to a more authentic and fulfilling life. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. Because when you know yourself truly and deeply, you can live with greater purpose, authenticity, and joy. So, what's the takeaway from Maria's journey? It's clear that understanding and embracing her dark side was a transformative experience. She learned that high expectations, stuffing negative emotions, and shutting people out abruptly, while part of her nature as an INFJ, were things she could manage and control. More than that, she realized that these weren't necessarily negative traits, but rather aspects of her personality that needed balance. Maria came to understand that overthinking, moodiness, and stubbornness in planning were all part of her uniqueness. And by acknowledging them, she was able to turn these traits into strengths, making her more effective in her relationships and life in general. And so we see the power of self-awareness. It's not about changing who we are, but understanding ourselves better. It's about embracing every part of our personality, even the dark side. Remember, your dark side isn't something to fear. It's simply another part of you, waiting to be understood and embraced.